All right. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this Meet the Proctors event hosted by the Global Alliance Education Committee and the Assessment and Certification Committee. I want to say thank you to our NCSP Certified Captioner, Julene Bahada, for sharing her special talents with us today. If you'd like to see the captions, just click the CC button at the bottom of the screen. Or if you would like to see the captions in stream text, you can find that link in the chat, and Lynn will drop that in the chat for us. First, some introductions. My name is Lydia Oxenrider, and I have been a stenographic captioner since 2009. I am chair of the Global Alliance Education Committee. Our hope for you today is that you get to learn more about the Global Alliance NCSP certification and that you get all of your questions answered from our proctors. I'm here with fellow committee members, and I will let them introduce themselves. First, committee member that is not able to join us right now is Jennifer Pearson. She is a stenographic cart captioner. She is a member of the Education Committee and chair-elect of the Global Alliance. I will turn it over to Lynn.
Hi, my name is Lynn Meyer. I am a voice captioner doing broadcast captioning, mostly news and sports for the past 15 years, also on the Education Committee. Our other member, Tracy Steele, is going to be a little late, I believe, and she is also a 15-year stenographic captioner in broadcast and CART. And now I'll turn it back to Lydia for the rest of our talk.
Thank you, Lynn. For today's event, I would like to welcome Steve Clark and Chris Ailes with the Assessment and Certification Committee to tell us a little bit more about what they do. If you have joined one of our Test Anxiety Buster sessions in the past, or even one of our networking events, we have talked about the Global Alliance Certification Test. But first, how about we hear from Steve and Chris with some introductions? If you guys can start off with just telling us where you're located and how long you've been a captioner. Chris?
Sure.
Steve?
My name is Chris Ailes, and I am a voice writer. I've got over 25 years experience. One of the founders of the Global Alliance Association. I work I'm still working as a cart provider.
And hi, everyone. I'm Steve Clark. I am in Washington, D.C. This is my 40th year of doing this work. I did 12 years as a court reporter and 28 years now as a stenographic caption.
Thank you, guys. I just want to say, if you guys have any questions you want answered, you can drop them in the chat so you don't forget. Or after their presentation, you guys can come on screen and ask them yourselves. I will turn it over to you guys.
Great.
Okay. Well, once again, on behalf of our committee, and I'll speak for Chris before I let Chris speak as well, but just thank you to everyone, Lydia, for organizing this. We have done many different gatherings from networking events to the Test Anxiety Busters, and we thought this would be another good chance to kind of answer any questions that you might have about the NCSP, about the NER method of grading. And we have put together some slides that will sort of direct us as we speak here. But let me just move on to my second slide, if I can do that. There we are. So the NCSP, and as you see here, it stands for NER, Certified Speech to Text Provider. The NER will get into some details of that in just a moment. Chris, I'll do this slide and then I'll let you take over for a bit on the next slide if that works for you.
That's fine, however you want to.
Okay. How does the NCSP differ from other assessments? Let me move my captions here. First of all, it's a 10-minute assessment, which is a bit unusual. I know other organizations do a 5-minute assessment. We use real world recordings, which means that you're going to need to capture things like applause and laughter as a parenthetical. It also means that the audio at times maybe goes in and out a bit, maybe a little bit of a strain for you to listen, but those kinds of things that we all as captioners deal with on a day-to-day basis. And one other way that we differ is that we do not have CEUs. Rather, we do require that you must retest every 4 years in order to maintain your active certification. So let me change to the next slide here, Chris. One moment. There we go.
So what is the NER? NER? It is the number of words in live captions with addition errors and recognition errors. Probably sounds a little bit confusing, but anybody that's a Global Alliance member, regardless of your captioning method, can take the NCSP.
We do have some examples. Chris, I'll let you start, and then there's one error that we didn't include here, and that is what's called a correct addition error. But Chris, if you want to walk through the errors and the scoring here.
Sure. The first error would be a critical error, which is a deduction of 1, and that's an addition where you've edited the sentence or the idea unit, what I want to call it, and it contains misinformation, and that would be considered a lie. Excuse me.
And we'll have examples after we give the introduction for how the errors are named, but we have some examples of different types of errors.
The next would be major error, which is 0.5. Oh boy.
If you want me to take over, Chris, so you can catch your
Yeah.
breath and cough. Chris just picked up a cold just to make it even more interesting for us today. The second type of an error, and the errors are weighted so that a more serious error, like the critical error, that creates information that the consumer doesn't know is incorrect, but it is believable information, is a higher deduction than the major and minor error. And just stepping back one, the NER was developed by a gentleman named Pablo Romero Fresco, and he is in Spain, and he's also a professor in the UK. And these are his, this is his system that we have adopted. He is also one of our founding members. The next error is a major error. And as you see here, that's a lesser deduction of 0.50, which is an omission of a full independent idea unit. And we'll explain what that means in a moment, independent idea unit. Or the omission of a dependent idea unit that renders the whole unit meaningless or nonsensical. And then the last one is a minor error, which is 0.25 deduction. So a lesser error, therefore a lesser deduction, which would be the omission of a dependent idea unit that doesn't then render the whole unit or sentence meaningless or nonsensical. And we'll show you examples here in just a moment. Chris, do you want to explain a correct addition?
Yeah, a correct addition would be when the writers taking down whatever the job they're on, were they correct and go back and correct, or use what we call interruption dashes, and it doesn't change the meaning of the idea unit. And that would be not really an error. It would be like you just corrected something. Like, let's say the word money came out and it was really supposed to be many. Well, if you correct it to many, then we would consider that a correct addition error. But there is 0 points taken off of that. It's just noted.
And the other more, I think, specific type of a correct addition is where you paraphrase. So let's say that the newscast says, today US President Joseph R. Biden Jr. said, and your captions say, today President Biden said. Those words that you drop, the middle name, the junior, those would not be counted against you because it is a dropping of information that does not change the meaning and does not lose it keeps the sentence intact. If, for instance, you wrote the word also instead of the word and, that would not be counted as an error. It's a substitution word that means the same thing. So it's called a correct addition. And as Chris said, no deduction for that. We note it, but it's 0.0 deduction. Okay, so Chris, I'll let you take this, which is an example of a minor error.
So here's the examples of minor errors. So what is spoken is, what a great goal by Ryan Giggs, and then your exclamation point. And what was captioned is, what great goal by a Ryan Giggs, with the exclamation point. So the difference there doesn't really, it's not changing the, they're still getting the idea, but it's enough of an error where it could be a little bit, difficult to follow.
Yeah, another way to look at it is it momentarily causes the reader to pause, but very quickly the reader sees, oh, that A was just misplaced,
Right.
and gets right back to reading and following the captions.
And the same thing with the spoken, for people are still missing following Sunday's tornado. And we have, instead of FOUR for the caption text, we have for, FOR. And other than that, nothing else has changed. And even though it says FOR instead of FOUR, that would be a minor error because the consumer can still understand, the inference of the caption for people.
And this example is also a good place to show where the correct addition could be scored if it were to happen. So instead of still missing following Sunday's tornado, if the captions say still missing after Sunday's tornado, it's a completely different word, but it means the same thing. It doesn't change the meaning. It doesn't cause false information to be given, and it doesn't cause the reader to in any way stop following or lose track of what the meaning of the sentence is. So here are major errors.
I like the first one. He's a valuable asset. He's a valuable asset. Now that's just nonsensical, and that would be 0.5. The next one is it really a temptation? Is it really a temptation? You could really get confused because it's a tend and then the tation, and then the by you, a bull asset. And so, yeah, that's like sort of nonsensical, and that would be considered a major error, and that would be a 0.5 taken off for that.
And we put these two examples in here because these show what I think obviously are either voice recognition errors or perhaps ASR errors, as opposed to if it were to be a steno captioner and instead of valuable, the misstroke created something completely different that would then again be sort of nonsensical and would also be counted as a major error. All right, and then here are a couple of examples of critical errors.
The first one, public funding for universities has been cut by 15% this year. And the caption text reads, public funding for universities has been cut by 50% this year, which clearly would be a lie because that's not what was said. It's 15% and clearly misleads the consumer.
Right. And Chris, if I could just add, importantly, it not only misleads the consumer, but the consumer has no way of knowing that information is wrong because it's believable. And
Correct.
there's a big difference between 15 and 50.
Right. And then the next one, donations are expected to increase tremendously this year. And the captioned text says donations aren't expected to increase tremendously this year, which again is a lie and it's misleading for the consumer. And so that's a critical error, and both errors would be 1 point.
And what we have found in our grading of the assessments that we've given is there are not usually many critical errors. Because as Chris was saying, some people will mishear something as 15% and then write a dash and go back and correct it to be what it should have been. And that brings up an interesting point that if you make a mistake and you write a dash and you correct it, as long as the information you write to correct it is correct, then the initial error does not count against you.
Right.
Okay.
So why don't you go ahead and do the
Sure.
minutes here?
So when we grade an assessment, we have the verbatim transcript that we have created for the material that we're testing on, and we put that into an Excel spreadsheet. And next to it, we line up the the real-time transcript that was created during the test. And we compare those, those units, if you will. As we mentioned before, an independent idea unit, often it is a sentence which may be composed of several dependent idea units. And as a whole, it makes sense giving you a full message. The dependent idea unit is a complement, and it provides information about the who, what, when, where, or how of the independent idea unit. So here are a couple of examples of errors that can happen within those independent and dependent idea units. So again, at the top, just some information explaining the meaning of each of those units. But if you look at what was spoken, Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana will see heavy storms. The captioner wrote, or the captions that were produced say Nebraska, Iowa, and Indiana will see heavy storms. Illinois got left out. The whole sentence as a whole still makes sense. You're just missing one part of it. So it's that one idea unit, the one where that was left off, that is counted as a minor deduction. Therefore, it's 0.25 off for that error. Chris, you want to take this or you want me to?
No, I could do it. This is our accuracy formula. So when we create the verbatim transcript, I do some computing for lexical density, number of words, and then it's all written out, the difficulty, the rate of speed, and then so we take those and compare them with the real-time transcript. So we're going to get the number of words in the real-time transcript, and then we take the errors and we divide it by the number of the words that are written. And then we multiply that by 100. So as the example, 1,000 words were written, and we've got 100 errors recorded, which is going to equal 900. So we take that 900 and we divide it by 1,000 and it gives us 0.9%. That is a score that is then 0.9% times 100 equals 90% accuracy.
And I'm not sure if we've mentioned this, and it may not be in the following few slides here, but our accuracy required in order to pass is 98% accurate. So what is the setup for testing? All of our testing is done remotely. We use Zoom and we use streamtext.net. If the test candidate or test taker cannot use streamtext.net, we can find other methods that allow the captions to be viewed in real time and to still be captured by us so that we can then do the comparison I talked about earlier in order to do the grading. You must have a camera and a microphone so that we can, in fact, see that you are the one doing the captioning, and so that we can communicate as we're setting up and testing and doing things like that to actually give the assessment. Output is in mixed case, and we ask for terminal punctuation, which means that at the end of every sentence, we ask that you then have a new line indicator so that each time a period, question mark, or exclamation point is in your captions, a new line will start after that. If that doesn't happen, it's not difficult for us to do the formatting on our end within Word.
Well, testing, when's it offered? We work with your schedule, and it's available in the morning, the evening, and the weekends, which sort of makes it easy for people to test that have a really heavy workload during the week. So Saturdays usually works out pretty good, you know, as one of the testing days. Yeah, I mean, we're pretty flexible. There's two of us, and then you know, go ahead and register to take it. We've got links here on the slide deck, and go ahead, click them. That we've got FAQs that explains a little bit more, and then you can also read about more of the NER guidelines, so that will help you prepare for the test itself.
And I'll just add one last thing, Chris, and that is that Chris and I both were trained by Pablo, who is as I said, the gentleman who created this method of scoring. And we both were certified by him. So we are both NER certified evaluators. One other question that comes up frequently is how long does it take after the test before I'll find out if I passed or did not pass? And the answer is it really depends, because Chris and I are the two who do the marking. The way we do it is, for instance, if Chris is the one giving the test, she will then be the one to load the transcript into the Excel spreadsheet, and usually she'll do the first review, and then I will do a review of what she reviewed. And because some of these things can be subjective, that gives us a chance to then talk about if we see things in a different way. So occasionally Chris will see something as a major error and I think it should be minor, or vice versa. And we'll talk about that. And it's really good for us because it kind of keeps us both, I think, fresh in our thinking when it comes to how the NER really should be administered and used to grade. And the good thing is rarely have we been more than, I think, 0.25, maybe 0.5 difference in marking, which shows that we really do think alike, and we do see the same types of errors. So it's good that we have that system to check each other.
We always have, we feel that we are too far apart, we will get together. Both Steve and I will meet, and then we'll go, you know, cell by cell and compare. And then it gets a little bit complicated because you're going back and forth to, you know, the NER guidelines, how it should be graded. And that's where Steve and I have to come to an agreement that, okay, you know, I see your point. I read the sentence this way, but you're right. And so that's our form of checks and balances.
Right. And one more thing before I stop to see if we have any questions or comments, and that is that we have a number of tests. So we don't have just one test that we give as our NCSP. At this time, we have 4 different tests. And we, as a committee, have all looked at those in order to make sure that they are equal as far as difficulty, as far as the density. And we do that too because, as we say, these are real world recordings. And if somebody really wanted to dig around and find what we are using as our material, I suppose they could. We do ask for anyone who takes the test to commit to not sharing with their 10 best friends or colleagues what the test was about. anything more than to say it was similar to a TED Talk, or it was similar to a classroom professor giving a lecture, something like that. But by mixing it up, we make sure that not only do we keep fresh with what we're doing, but that we don't have somebody who may have found out what one of the tests was about and maybe wanted to try to do something they shouldn't do.
Right.
So I'll stop there. And Chris, if you wanted to add anything before we ask for questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that when we choose the test material, okay, Steve and I, we will, agree, and Matthew, who has just joined lately, the assessment committee, will we'll look at it, we'll listen to it, get it typed up, and then once it's typed up, it's put through a couple of programs, like I said, the lexical density one, where it measures how difficult, and not all parts are difficult. Some parts are, easy, and then you get into a more difficult part where they go a lot faster. So we calculate that, and then I calculate the speed and of course it's real world, so it's variable speed. And mixed in with that, the difficulty of the words, the syllables, the cadence, and so a little bit goes in, a little bit of work. Well, I should say not a little bit. A lot of work goes into preparing a test for somebody to take. So, it's just not, type up a transcript and then, we're gonna grade somebody. It's got certain criteria that it has to meet.
I don't see any questions yet, so I'm going to add one more thing. I've said that 3 times now, but this time I think should be my last one. And that is that I really like this method of scoring because I think it is more focused on the consumer. And I don't think that it's really important if someone wrote the word and instead of the word also, that be counted as an error. I don't think that counting off for dropping the first name of the president when you can see the president and the president's last name is going to count against you when it is helping you to stay on top of what's being said and to produce captions that help the consumer. So I'm really excited about this method. I think it's a really smart way to do it, and I think it's fair. We are method agnostic, so we don't give different tests depending on whether you are a steno voice captioner or an automatic speech recognition product. Instead, we try to be as method agnostic as we can, and we make sure that everyone is treated the same way and held to the same standard. Matthew, I see you had a question.
Yes, I just want to throw in that if you've ever talked to Dr. Romero Fresco, like, this is not just some guy's idea. It is. There's a massive body of research that he conducted over the years that backs up why all this happened. And eye tracking consumer, I mean, you name it. Like, he has years of, so it's all research based. And the play on words, correct me if I'm wrong, but NER, it just seems so bizarre. Why did he do that? It's because the word error rate model was going crazy. Everyone thought the WER model was all you needed to rate accuracy of captioning. But with that model, it's every word is counted the same weight. There's no weighted. So 15 versus 50%, that's just one tiny little error. Just like can and can't, no problem. But like in real life, those humans see that if you're relying on that, it's a lot different. And then other stuff that isn't, just like what Steve was saying. So it's really not just our ideas and what we think. And there's a lot of backing to this. And frankly, it makes common sense too, now that we're doing it. And I would agree between Chris and Steve, they do have a lot of inter-rater reliability when you become a certified evaluator. I've seen others who are certified evaluators, and I don't really want to do that job because you really have to know what you're doing. and I just have a lot of respect for them. So even though they come across as very personal and friendly, and this is what we think, there's an entire like body of you know, backing to this whole method and how it all works. So it's neat to see it come to fruition here in the Global Alliance.
Thank you for that, Matthew. Ken, I see you had your hand up.
I do. I have a kind of a real world question or two to ask. I'm not a steno or live captioner, but I own a small captioning company that uses those people. So in the test, is there any last minute information like here's an unusual name that's in here, write a brief for it, and let's see if you get it right?
It's a good question. There is, yes. We do provide at the time of testing we provide the captioner with a list of prep. We don't give them everything, but we do tell them who the speaker is. We give a brief bio of the speaker. We tell the captioner what the topic of the talk will be, and we give a handful of names and terms as well.
Got it. So average pre-production information.
Yes.
Okay. Second question, in the dash correction, is there a facility to let them backspace instead of leave the bad word up there? Because some platforms, both in presentation and in authoring, allow that and some don't.
Yeah.
But it's a cleaner look for the reader if the mistake goes away completely and then is replaced by the correct thing.
Yeah, you're allowed to edit while you're taking the test if you have to, you know, want to delete a word instead of using the dash interruption. You know,
Yeah.
if you have enough time and you can do it, you can delete the word and then say the correct captions.
Yeah. I would only
Good.
add to that, building on what I said earlier, Ken, and that is that if you try to correct the error and you make another error, they both get counted against you. So
Right.
I know having, as a steno captioner, there's that temptation to keep hitting that button to take away the errors and then put the right ones up there. And many times I've tried to do that and then I create additional errors. So just one thing to keep in mind.
Okay, and again, stop me if I'm going too long, but on the terminal punctuation issue, are those not counted as errors?
They are not. We ask for the terminal punctuation because it really, I mean, we want you to put punctuation in. If your punctuation's not there, that is counted as an error. If the punctuation gets added where it shouldn't be and it changes the meaning of the sentence or the idea unit, that does get counted as an error. But by adding the new line symbol after, so that period and then the next line starts on a new line, that's more because it helps us with the time it takes to put the two transcripts to be side by side. So if you don't put the new line indicator after your period, question mark, or exclamation point, that's not counted against you. It's sort of a nicety for us.
Got it. Okay.
It makes our job easier to align.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll tell you the time that it takes for us to grade the test. The grading part is shorter. What takes longer is what we call aligning the cells. So that is where, let's say the test starts with welcome, we're glad you're here. Now let's get started with our speech. If we have that as welcome period, we're glad you're here period. Now let's get started with our speech period. But the captioner uses commas. We have it set up as 3 different cells. For the captioner, it comes out as 1. We then have to go and break that up so that they all are right next to each other and we're grading similar information. So it's that aligning or breaking up right now that's taking a lot of our time. There are some AI engines that we've been looking at that are helping us with that. But right now it's still a big human factor that takes a long time to do.
It's almost like a dumb AI transcriber, like the YouTube built-in one, that just gives you a list of words. Might be not the end result, but it would give you a head start at the alignment. And then,
Yes.
of course, you'd have to go in and correct that. But
right.
it's what I usually recommend when online when people said, I want the TikTok 1 word per caption thing. It's like, well, there's a way to do that,
Yeah.
and it will take forever, and it's rarely free. So anyway, moving
And
on.
those are
Thanks.
fun to watch because they're about 1 minute to 2 minutes long, but try watching that for a 30-minute presentation.
Hugely annoying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hugely annoying. Anyway, moving on.
Were those your questions, Ken? Did you have anything else?
I'm back 30 some years ago, 32 years ago. One of my early jobs was early captioning job was helping a master's student evaluate the timing of captions for the old school elementary low reading level caption editing that used to take place.
Okay.
And it's just interesting and gratifying to see that that is not something that's desired so much anymore, because in analyzing recorded programs from the usual suppliers 30 years ago, it was interesting how the editing was performed and how new lines took the place of commas. They basically never used commas. They used a temporal pause and then did the next line and used the timing space as a comma. But it's just something that came to mind.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm done.
Okay. All right. Are there other questions? Lydia, I'm scrolling through the chat just to make sure I'm not missing any, but if there are other questions, feel free to hop on camera or unmute yourself, or put that in the chat as well.
I do have one question. How would one educate companies that don't know about the NCSP? How would a captioner be like, I'm NCSP certified? What kind of like highlights can they give that company as to why that's important to be?
Chris, do you want to start?
Well, I have 3 certifications, and the last one, when I say the NCSP, I sort of explain to them the process, how you're graded as opposed to NCRA or NBRA, and the differences. And so it's a little bit, you have to take a little bit more time when you explain it, because you're explaining it as, it's not like, oh, you missed a comma here, okay, mark off, mark, it's all about the idea unit. It's about, as we broke it down for you, I try to break it down for the company that I'm working for, or that wants my certification. But having a certification, especially when you have more than one, really helps with your marketability.
I would add to that this is being used globally. So Canada uses this method for scoring accuracy. It's used in Europe. It's used by a number of captioning companies around the world. I would also give the examples that we've been giving here, showing the importance of communication access and the consumer being able to follow what's being said, rather than ensuring that every single word is captured. And if, again, and rather than also appears on the screen, that doesn't really make any difference and should not be counted as an error. I just like how current, in my mind, forward thinking this is. I like that it's method agnostic. I like that it really is looking at the idea of making sure that accessibility is there for everyone. I just think it's a smarter way to grade.
Personally, I think it makes more sense when you think about it. If you're the consumer and you're watching it, you want to get the gist of what's being said. You don't need every single word, but you do want to know what's going on. And you know, that's part of what this test does, is makes sure that the consumer gets what the consumer needs on captions. I would rather see paraphrases than word for word captioning with a bunch of mistakes. Does that help?
Yeah, and
I-
don't misunderstand. We're not
Yeah.
encouraging this to become something where you're taking notes or you're only getting the highlights, but we do see the value, and that's what I think Pablo did with his developing of this system, in not having to capture every single word and being able to paraphrase and still get across the meaning of what is being said, and the consumer doesn't lose vital information. So again, I just think it's more up to date with the world that we're living in, quite frankly.
I have a comment. This is Margaret Downs. How, I mean, I think that all of us know the value in this certification and what it provides and you know the grading and that kind of thing. But how do we get that across to the public? You know, maybe not necessarily companies for whom we work, but just the general public, like, you know, because they're looking for accuracy.
Right.
So how would maybe Global Alliance maybe come up with I don't know, a couple sentences that, you know, we as captioners could present and say, okay, well, this, you know, the NCSP is such and such, you know, because I think that most companies and people are aware of NCRA and VRA, you know, quite a few are, but
Yeah.
the NCSP, yeah, so that, I don't know. I think it would help.
Yeah,
I just,
marketing is certainly something that we have been trying since we've been in existence for, I believe we're now coming up on our 6th year here. And it's like any other organization, Margaret, as you know, it's difficult. You just got to keep pushing, and you got to keep on talking and having meetings like this,
yeah.
and getting the word out. I do think that giving examples like we have here in our slides of why an error isn't necessarily going to be an error. And what I
Right,
mean by that is my going back to my and/also example,
right.
but also, you know, I part of what we've tried to do, and I'm not as involved with the executive committee or the board anymore, is to get everyone involved. And so I think that's where the value of what we do with every method being welcome, with consumers being welcome as members, and trying to get younger members to join as well. I just think that diversity is what's going to help us.
Right. And I think I mean, you know, I do this every day, all day, and it, you know, and also, and you know, that kind of thing. I think we all do that.
Sure.
So, you know, that's, yeah, it's more of a real, you know, real life situation. So,
Right. I would say that our education committee does a lot on this, and it sounds like maybe speaking with them directly would be a good idea too. I think Lydia could probably hook you up with that since she is part of the education committee. But yeah, these are the kinds of ideas that I think we need more of, and not that we don't have them, but getting someone who comes in with fresh ideas is definitely something that helps us.
Difficult
So I have a
part
question
would be,
that's,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ken.
oh, sorry, just real quick. I confess to not looking this up on your website, but on the website, is there a 1 or 2 paragraph description of this testing method for the consumer or the employer, not necessarily for reporters, and a quick comparison of it versus the other certification methods out there. So it's like, this one does this in this way, and it's different from NCRA and others in this way, but it's the same in this way, you know, to give some something that a captioner can point their client to. It says, go look at this website, and it'll give you a rundown of what that means, you know. And I'm sorry for not looking before I asked the question.
Yeah, and I'm going to defer to Lydia or others who are in the education committee who might know. It's been a while since I've looked myself, Ken. But I like the idea, and I think that having that kind of a side-by-side comparison is a great idea.
Jennifer is our website guru. I don't know of anything on there, but I did take note of that, Ken. And you were at our networking event and gave us a great idea too. So I did take note of that maybe we can come up with some type of blurb to put on there for companies, for captures to say, hey, go to this website. You'll find out more about it. We do have a section on there, the NCSP section, that has information about it, but it would be nice maybe to have something on there for a company to go see.
Yeah,
because it would make then the reporter not required to toot their own horn, but rather say, here's why these people think I'm great, not why I think I'm great. So
I
anyway.
like that.
If I could throw something in real quick, and just looking up on the website while you were talking, we don't answer your questions directly up there, but there is an FAQ page that has links on it that go off to like a Wikipedia page all about the NER model, and a couple of other pages out there in the web space that have a lot of information about it. So while we don't answer the questions directly, we tell people where to go look.
I think that side-by-side comparison, I've seen a couple of nodding heads, and I see Tracy's comment. So yeah, I think that's something that is likely going to be in the works, Ken.
Mhm.
Does anybody else have any questions for our proctors?
I have a throughput question. Do these tests take place one-on-one?
They do.
Or are there multiple people taking them at the same time?
Yeah, they are one-on-one. When you register, I'm usually the one who sends an email to Chris asking her, tell me what dates you're available, and then I will send to the test candidate, here are dates we are available coming up in the next 2 weeks. If you have a date that works better, please let us know. We've had people who have tested within 1 day of signing up, and others who sign up and say, well, with the holidays coming in, can we do this in 8 weeks? And so we set it up for that. So it's always one-on-one. And we also take time before to help the person get settled in. So we start with asking the person we record it, identify who you are. But before we start that recording, we do ask you to show your ID to us, so we know that you in fact are the person who has signed up for the test. And then we start the recording so that personal information isn't saved. And then we have a checklist that we go through. And part of that checklist just involves reminders. Don't forget to close any background programs. Please share your screen so we can make sure you're not recording anything that's being done here. Please point the camera at either the steno machine or the voice setup, depending on how you're captioning. So we go through a number of things. We provide the prep. We, as I talked about, describe what the test entails, and we make sure the person is really settled in, you know, chance to use the restroom, last glass of water, whatever it is you need. And then at the end, we do watch as, after we have saved the transcript from StreamText, we watch as the person who's taking the test deletes it from their system, including emptying the recycle bin so that there's no copy of it. So we don't have to worry about that in any way getting out where it doesn't belong. One other thing I'll add, we have had a couple folks who didn't pass and who retook the test. We initially had a 3-month wait before you could retake the test. We've changed that to a 1 month wait. And really that's for just the purpose of someone not testing every single day, which would only last 4 days because that's how many tests we have. But we want the person to not have to wait so long, particularly if they're really eager to get certification or if it's going to help them to have that for their employer or for clients who would like to see.
Also, I could just add, when that they don't just get, oh, you passed or you failed. They get input from Steve and myself of different things that we notice that they should work on, especially, like if they don't pass, we'll write a paragraph or two, say, okay, well, I can tell if it's a voice writer, what they have to work on, you know, with the voice. And of course, Steve is steno. And so, we provide that input. It's not just, okay, well, you failed, but here's why.
Right.
Excuse
I kind of have two questions. So if so you say it's a month minimum before they can retest. If they don't want to take it in a month, can they take it like 2 months down the road or 3 months? Is there like a limit where like you have to take it before 6 months?
No, you have to wait a month, but after that, if you want to wait a year, you can wait a year. There's no deadline by which it has to be done.
Is there any tips or tricks that you can give someone that wants to take the test? Because I know a lot of it stems from test anxiety. So anything to calm their nerves or any
Chris,
tips
I
or
see you
tricks?
were about to say something.
You know what? There is test anxiety, but sometimes you just gotta sit down and you just gotta let it go. It is what it is. And once you figure that out, then you're not fighting yourself. You're just going over.
And remember, everyone has test anxiety.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Yeah.
much everyone.
What I have always told people is I still get nervous every time I put my hands on the machine, and I've been doing this now for 40 years, but I remind myself that I know what I'm doing, that I've got the skills to do it, that I always jokingly say I'm the most qualified person in the room to be doing it, which at the time I'm the only person in the room. But I give myself 10 seconds to be nervous. And at the end of 10 seconds, I make sure I'm still breathing and I let out a big exhale and I just go with what I'm doing. As Chris says, you do it because you have the skills and because you know you can do it. The other thing I would recommend is to test, I'm sorry, to practice um, doing things like TED Talks and any kind of a speech that you can find online of a professor in a classroom. They're easy to find. That's the type of material that we are using for our tests. And I would recommend practicing both at the speed that you are comfortable with, and then pushing yourself to a higher speed. But then actually, I think practicing at a lower speed really helps you with your confidence too. Because when you start to see really, just excellent captions as opposed to I'm doing a good job, then when you get up to your speed, you're taking that positive feeling that you got from practicing at a slower speed. And I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, pushing yourself past the point of comfort.
Yeah.
And when you are practicing, don't just practice and not look at your transcript. I have a little notepad near me, and when a word comes out wrong, I jot it down and I'll go back and I'll listen to it. And if I need to maybe make it for a voice writer what I call a unique word, I will. Or I make sure that I go back and I correct it, because for a voice writer, we just give it the correct acoustical data. For a steno writer, you would give it the correct stroke or a different stroke. But it's about pushing your boundaries, but it's also about being aware of how you write. It's looking at the transcript after the practice transcript. It's looking at it and saying, you know, what do I need to work on? Did I do too many commas? You know, this word keeps coming out wrong. Well, if the word keeps coming out wrong, well, you know, do something about it then. You know, don't wait for the day of the test.
Yeah, I agree with that. Ken, I see you have one more question. I think, Lydia, this is probably our last, right? I know we're at the top of the hour.
Yep.
And the question is, have any typewell practitioners done the test? We haven't, and this is not designed for typewell. I don't know if it could be used for typewell. I did meet
No, I think Steve's frozen.
Steve is frozen. Yeah, I am a C print provider also. And this would not be the kind of test that you would give typewell or C print, because that's just basically, you know, you're not doing verbatim anyway.
Yeah, but I have a question about that, if I may ask, Chris.
Yeah,
Since it's idea units and not actual words, why wouldn't it work? I mean, obviously, if anybody's dropping idea units, that's a problem. But if they're
yeah.
just getting the ideas down in fewer words, it seems to me it's a natural.
It does. I have tried it. In fact, we did an experiment with it way back when I first got certified, you know, and I actually used it in a meeting, and they weren't happy with it, even though it was, you know, it wasn't verbatim. They wanted verbatim, or as close to verbatim as possible. But, you know, yeah, as far as the idea unit, you could get it down, you know, in a fewer words, but I don't think that that would be the, how do I want to put it, the flavor of what we're testing, you know, for this test, the NCSP.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's a good question, because
Well,
it is, yeah, yeah.
Well, I think I've read something that Pablo wrote, or he even
Yeah,
though he even says that this is perfect for testing meaning for meaning because it's
yeah,
about idea units. And I know that it originates in Europe, if I recall, and
yeah.
Europe does a lot more meaning for meaning than we do, is my understanding.
Oh, yeah, they do.
So, I mean, so I don't know. I'm
I mean,
I'm curious. That's all. What I'm saying is I'm curious. That's all.
well, as a CPRIM provider, I would say, you know, that's very
Mm.
feasible, because it is idea units. And as a CPRIM provider, you know,
Hmm.
you're almost like, it's almost like a steno theory, well, for CPRINT anyway, you know, like if you say practice, okay, it's PRKTS, you know, so you're doing stuff like that. You're actually creating your own shorthand, but it's not possible to get every word. So in essence, what you're doing is you're actually listening, and then you're formulating in your head before you even type out what they
Right.
say, you know. So I don't know. It's an interesting it's interesting, Tom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
I
you
will say
guys.
that I have seen Typewell as captions um, in a particular environment, and it was shocking how good it was. And I'm pretty much I'm pretty picky about steno accuracy for my work, and I would have put this person on a job easily. Now that doesn't mean every Typewell person is that good, but I had limited expectations that were totally blown away in watching this work. So, and they are in fact captioning uh, some city council type things very
Mhm.
successfully uh, for about a year now, and
Yeah.
it's all typo people. It's no steno people. So, I mean that's
And I
not
think,
to put people against each other, but it's like that is also a volume source of captioning that, you know, could benefit from this, I guess.
yeah,
I'm,
and
I'm
an agnostic organization, as we say, then we welcome type well and C-print captioners or to our organization, and it'd be nice if we had some way of certifying them as well. So I'd say I think it bears research for the future.
Hey, Tom, this is Steve. I'm back. I'll just tell you very quickly what I was saying before I froze on you there. And that is that I did meet with the folks from the organization that represents Typewell and Cprint. I can't remember the name of it. Association of Transcription, that's as far as I can remember. And Kate was part of that meeting. And I've forgotten Kate's last name. But what it came down to was they really had the expertise of what Typewell and Cprint encompasses and what would be a good way to test them. And so that's where it was left. I agree. If we could find a way to make it happen with them, that would be great. But we really do need the input, I think, from Typewell and Cprint folks to do that. Kate Urban, that's the name. Thank you, Kimberly.
Yeah, well, I would hope that someday we will get a sufficient number of Typewell or Cprint practitioners as members of the Global Alliance that would then bring that expertise with them to us.
Mm-hmm.
Since we're a agnostic association, method agnostic. So anyway, there's always more to do in the future, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
I just want to acknowledge that we are over time, and I want to be respectful of our captioner, Julene. So if you guys want to pop in the chat any emails, if you guys want to continue this conversation with each other, that would be great. I just want to thank Steve and Chris for talking with us today. I'm sorry, can you hear my dog in the background?
Yeah, that's a
Tracy, will you take this away?
Mm-hmm.
Just thank you for talking with us today about the NCSP certification. If you have any more questions that come up about it, please don't hesitate to email us. Someone will drop the email in the chat. I think they already have.
yeah.
And I just want to thank everybody for joining us today for this event. If you haven't joined to help the future of this profession and access, please do. We'll drop a link in the chat for joining. The only way things will improve is if we all get involved and advocate for it. Also give a follow on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Insta, Twitter, X, whatever, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
or YouTube. And if you're feeling extra generous, we'll drop a link in the chat for donations since we are a nonprofit organization and every little bit helps. Once again, a huge thank you to the NCSP certified captioner, Julene Bahada, for captioning for us today. Thanks again, everyone, for attending our Meet the Proctors event, and we hope you learned more about the certification and hopefully will sign up to become certified. Hint, hint.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.